All right, so with the leaks rolling in, it looks like we can finally put together here the Saints 2025 schedule. This is courtesy of Tina Howe over on X. And it looks like the Saints are going to be kicking things off versus the Arizona Cardinals week one in the Dome. I like that they are starting things off at home because you're starting a new era of Saints football under new leadership, at least head coaching wise, new quarterback. Um, just like a fresh start, right? And you get to do that at home week one. I like it, and I like that it is a winnable game. It's against the Arizona Cardinals. Again, you know, it's a toss up. I'm not saying that it's a guaranteed win because, obvious reasons, but it is a game that it definitely seems winnable, especially week one, because week ones are always like super wonky and it's just super weird always because none of these teams know each other, right? Especially a team like the Saints who come in with a new offense, new quarterback, new head coach, new defense, just completely revitalized things, right? But the Cardinals will have Kyler Murray, always tough to deal with. Saints, historically struggle versus running quarterbacks, right? But again, new scheme now, so we'll see how that goes. But a good test week one for both the Saints defense and for whoever the Saints quarterback will be, because Arizona, they do some pretty creative stuff on defense that you don't see a lot of teams doing in the NFL. So starting things off, Arizona. Then you have, it looks like, another home game against the Niners. The Niners had a down year last year. They suffered a ton of injuries, just like we did, right? So you can't really take much from their season last year. If you assume that it's anything like the Niners that we've become accustomed to over the past, decade, in for a tough one, right? In for a tough one week two at home. But hey, it's the NFL, right? They're all tough. And then week three, it looks like the Saints go to Seattle. Seattle also new look, right? Got rid of Geno. It'll be Sam Darnold, I assume, unless, Jalen Milroe just looks fantastic through training camp and somehow wins that job. It looks like it'll be the Saints taking on Sam Darnold in Seattle. Another good one. Then the Saints go to Buffalo. Now, I will say the only positive is that this is happening in week four, which will be in what? September, October probably, if my months are correct. So hopefully, the only good thing about that is playing them that early is they don't got to go into the snow, right? In Buffalo in like a November or December. So hopefully that the weather is still decent at that time of the year and that it won't be, a snow game. That's the only positive about playing the Buffalo Bills, really at all, is that the time of year you're getting to play them because that team is a juggernaut, right? Especially as long as number 17 is there, okay? And then week five, you have this Saints versus the New York Giants. That'll be an interesting one because, again, two teams who aren't really expected to be that good. Who knows who will be playing quarterback for the Giants? I assume it'll be Russell Wilson, but I mean, kind of like the Browns, they have a ton of guys on their roster now as well. They got Russ, Jameis, they drafted Dart, so who knows in that regards. And then we have week six, Saints versus New England. Again, a team that we don't know. New England got rid of their head coach and went and got Mike Vrabel, who is a culture type of coach who is probably going to turn around that franchise just like that. They already have the quarterback in place with Drake May. I thought he looked good in spots last year. So again, it's just another toss-up game that we really it's winnable, right? This isn't like we're playing Buffalo here, so it's a winnable game. Um, but and then week seven, again, very similar to the game against New England. You go and you play at Chicago, and similar to Buffalo, at least it's not going to be in like a December or January type of game where at the end of the season where it's just going to be insane weather, right? Now, who knows? This time in Chicago, it actually might be still be a little bad, but again, it's not like a December thing. So, um, Chicago, yeah, just like I was saying, like New England, they got their quarterback. They went and got Ben Johnson from the Lions, so it's just a completely new look franchise. So who knows at this point, what these teams are going to look like. So it's tough to predict how the games are going to go exactly. And then week 8, you go to the Rams. That's always a tough one with Sean McVay. Week 9, division game against Tampa. They got Baker, who's been playing really good. That's always going to be a tough one. Division's always tough. Week 10 at Carolina again. Bryce Young seems like he finally figured things out last year, so Who knows? Again, division. And then week 11 for your bye week. Now, I mean, it, having your bye week in week 11 is certainly better than having it at like the top half of the season, because you definitely want, after a tough season, you want your bye week really to be somewhere close to the middle. And I think week 11 is around where you want it, because you don't want it too early, because guys are just going to get more banged up as the season goes along. So if you have your bye week too early when you really don't really need it, you don't really have a ton of guys that are super hurt yet, you don't really want that, right? So when you have it a little later, like in week 11, by that time you usually have tons of injuries, tons of guys that are banged up and need the time off. So I think week 11 is a pretty good spot. Then you come out of the bye week in a big game against Atlanta, again a division, always a close one against those guys. Let's see, what, week 13, Saints at Miami. Who knows how they're going to look. I think this is probably a do or die year for Mike McDaniels over there in Miami. So I think they'll probably be, as long as Tua can stay healthy, they'll be a solid team. Not exactly a Buffalo or anything like that. And then Tampa again, Carolina. Then you finish off the season against the New York Jets, who it looks like their quarterback is going to be Justin Fields, I believe. And then you also have Aaron Glenn taking over as a head coach. Again, we don't know how these teams are going to look. We don't know how the Saints are going to look. So by the time week 16 rolls around, it's the Saints versus Jets. It could be a fight for the number one overall pick, if you get what I'm saying, right? And then week 17, Saints at Tennessee. And then again, another team that's going to be fresh with a new quarterback, Cam Ward. And then week 18, Saints at Atlanta, closing out against the bitter division rivals. And look, I mean, let's just say that sparks fly, that pigs fly, and week 18 comes down for the division. Is it likely? Probably not. But could you imagine that? A rookie, Tyler Shuck or a Spencer Rattler coming in week 18. You need to beat the Atlanta Falcons to win the division or to make the playoffs. And you hate them, they hate us. And it's literally you versus them for all the marbles on the table in the very last game of the season. Of course, they're coming in this year with Michael Penix Jr. in his sophomore season after getting some playing time in his rookie season. So that should be an interesting one. Granted that, or assuming that both teams are at least a decently relevant and come week 18. But of course, we could get there. And again, both teams just are absolute garbage. Wouldn't shock me either way. So, I mean, in terms of like toughness, I hate the discussion around, oh, they have the fifth easiest schedule, oh, they have the fifth hardest schedule, because it's all based off what the team was last year, right? What the teams they're playing were last year. It's silly, because so many teams are so different with new coaches, new players. It's just a silly way to gauge schedule toughness, in my opinion, because we don't know how any of these teams are going to be this season. So while the Saints may have, what is it, like the fifth or something easiest schedule, we just really don't know that, right? Yep. So there you have it. That's the schedule. Appreciate you guys watching. Peace.